Hi, thank you very much for joining me for this today. I'm Julio Taylor, CEO at Hallam. Today I'm going to talk to you about what I like to call truth marketing and why you need to invest in trust to survive the future of marketing. So hopefully you can see my slides. Okay, so I'm going to start a little bit about me. So I'm Julio. Nice to meet everybody. These two little guys are my sons, Danny and Luca. They're the main thing that keep me busy these days. Before I was in the world of digital marketing, I was a musician. That was actually my job. Well, it would be if I got paid adequately, but I wasn't. But nowadays, I am the CEO of a digital agency called Hallam. We're a strategic agency based in Nottingham, just down the road from Esendex, and we specialize in strategic digital marketing services, including SEO, PPC, UX, design, and we bring it all together in a strategic approach. And we've been around for about 20 years. So what I'm going to talk about to you about today is something that I call truth marketing. Before I actually get into the detail of what I mean by that, I'd like to set the scene and talk about some of the themes that keep me busy and keep our agency busy, and the type of thinking that is guiding where we are. Now, as a digital agency, we work with a broad range of brands, and from public and to private sector to large corporates to smaller independents. But there are a set of themes and a set of standard constants, actually, that are governing the present and the future that I think are really, really important. And these are the things I'd like to talk to you about today. The first thing, and I think probably the most important overarching theme for 2021 and beyond, is what we call the attention economy. And that is that every marketing strategy is competing for the same thing, and that is the limitations of the human attention span. The challenge, whether you're doing advertising or messaging or a website, the challenge is, what are you going to do that's going to make that person stop scrolling and actually pay attention to what you've got to say? What are they going to do? What are you going to do about that? We're talking about a massive shift in what we're actually competing for, from the ability to target and the ability to simply reach people, towards the ability to grab their attention and have them do something meaningful and valuable with that attention. That's what we call the attention economy. And actually, that's amplified by the rising expectations that users have of virtually everything that they touch on a phone or a computer. The maturity of digital users nowadays is so high, partially due to a younger audience that's born into a digital first, device first lifestyle, but also these apps like Spotify and YouTube and Netflix, they've conditioned users to expect a much higher level of experience than ever before. So to be able to meet rising expectations in an economy that revolves largely around the ability to connect and the ability to hold attention, how do you do that? And privacy has also become a massive component of virtually every strategy. Governments and regulators are reacting with policy and with increased aggressiveness towards advertisers and towards networks and social networks. And actually, one of the things that it's doing is it's making users highly sensitive to what is and isn't advertising, what is and isn't meaningful and real communication, and what's actually just a sales pitch. I think that sort of self-awareness of what privacy really means and how valuable that is really driving a whole new level of behavior that we have to be aware of. And I think it's also important to bear in mind that this sort of COVID, digital first COVID world is here to stay. It's never going to go back to the way that it was before the first lockdowns a year ago this week. It's true that we'll go back to some of our old habits, there's no question, but it's also true that I think we are now a digital first economy, and that's likely to stay. We've gone through 10 years of digital transformation in a matter of months through 2020 and the beginning of 21. And that is going to have a permanent, irreversible effect on consumer behavior that we now need to take very, very seriously as we think about marketing strategies and we think about how we connect with customers, how we engage with users. And history shows that every generation has, in recent history, has formed. Sorry, my Siri just started talking to me for no reason. Every generation in recent history that's been forged by global events has changed the world. So they've changed the world usually for better, but whether it's a major event such as the racial justice movement in the 1960s or the recent Black Lives Matter movement, or whether it's COVID, it is a time for change. And that change is going to trigger an irreversible tipping point for how brands have to interact with the people they're trying to influence. And that's the central theme of what I'm talking about. What is that change? Why are things changing? And I think the best way I can summarize it is it's changing because people want better. They want better ways to communicate. They want better ways to interact with brands. They want better ways to buy from brands. They want better ways to communicate. Better is the theme, and it isn't a matter of faking it. It isn't a matter of pretending that you are better. You have to be better, and I'll talk to you about what I mean by that. There's some really interesting research done by Deloitte, which they call the Global Millennial Survey, and it shows that millennials and Gen Z have a strong resolve and a vision to build a better future. And actually, the survey shows the vast majority of millennials and Gen Z are taking active steps, that they're actually taking action on their words. They want to change the planet. They want to make a better future, right? Whether it's fast fashion, whether it's plastic waste, whether it's recycling, whether it's the local environment, whether it's using local stores instead of large corporations, there is a conscious shift in what it means to be good. So in summary, if we've reached the tipping point of expectation, both in terms of digital complexity and digital sophistication, and we've reached a tipping point in terms of what people expect from brands and how there's this merging between social and corporate responsibilities. What do we do? What do we do about that? How are we going to change? So what does it mean for brands? This is a really difficult question to answer, and I wish I could give you the answer immediately, but I can give you some pointers, and I can give you what I believe the future means, and what I believe that that sort of strive for better, what we can do about that, and we can start doing it today. First of all, we are in what I call the age of trust. People are tired. People are worn out, whether it's division or conflict or disease or sadness or whatever it is. We've entered an age of almost like post-internet. The internet is no longer a novelty. It's now an everyday tool that allows us to connect with virtually every human on the planet that has access to technology. You can connect with them instantly, and that carries a great weight of responsibility and a great weight of a duty of care. And that duty of care has to be exercised by the publishers of content and the companies that are trying to connect with those consumers. And the consumer is the judge of that. Now, the key thing is we can no longer afford as brands and as marketers to stand by and let the world demand a better way and not say anything, not be part of that conversation. And in the age of trust, silence is a sound of compliance and sort of defeat against something that is quite clearly reached a tipping point, and it's almost certainly going to continue to increase. Now, standing by and saying nothing is a problem, but also It has to be true. If you do get involved in the conversation, if you do become a part of this global willingness to tell the truth, to speak to users on an emotional level, to talk about real things, it has to be true. Now, this is a great example of how you don't do it. We celebrate remarkable women by putting 3 white men on a billboard. This is not what we mean when we talk about a better future, when we talk about truth and trust. This is tokenism. What does it have to do with marketing? So it's all very good talking about this this concept of trust and this vision for a better future and a vision for this merging between economics and the planet and all these different things. What does it have to do with marketing? Well, actually, I think it's very simple, and I think marketing is actually the business of emotion. Our brains are hardwired to find reward for emotional response. There is a part of the brain that reacts to emotional responses and to feelings much faster than any type of rational messaging or rational marketing content would ever reach. Trust is an emotion. The perception of value, of quality, is an emotion. The reason why you walk into an expensive hotel or expensive restaurant and it feels good, and that gut feeling that you get when you walk into the house of your dreams, that is an emotion. And that's what we're trying to tap into as marketers on a daily basis, whether it's through messaging or content or video or even simple text message. It's about reassurance and emotion and inspiration. And to be able to tap into this hardwired element of the brain, we have to tap into the emotional needs of our customers. And we know that those emotional needs are driven by this need for change. So younger buyers are flocking to brands who openly demonstrate their purpose and values in authentic and credible ways. So this chart here shows the shift towards consumers shifting towards sustainable gifts for Christmas in the United Kingdom in 2020. 65% of 18 to 24s are actively searching for sustainable products for such a monumental event such as Christmas. And actually, they're willing to pay more for it. So ethical buyers are prepared to spend more on sustainable products or products that mean something to them on an environmental basis or a sustainable basis or an ethical basis. And brands that used to be outliers, whether it's the Body Shop or Patagonia, they are now the mainstay. Now that they're the ones being copied now, who used to be outliers and somewhat mocked for their tree-hugging mindsets or whatever that used to be. Now, you might be asking yourself, is B2B different? Well, actually, it isn't, because this little piece of data here is from a research that Google conducted on the B2B buying journey, and 45% of B2B influencers are between 18 and 34. It's the same demographic that we've now know are primarily motivated by social and ethical causes. 81% of B2B influencers are not at C-suite level. There is an influence by committee. There is a broader consortium of decision makers in B2B. And authority is actually spread. 60% of B2B influencers have final authority coming from these two groups here. So we're seeing a large decentralization of decision making, in part powered by people who are motivated by something other than money, something much more important than money, whether it's the planet or whether it's social justice or whatever that is. So actually, think of purpose or think of trust as a competitive advantage rather than a burden or a mission or something that's or fad. It's a competitive advantage. There's actually quite a bit of evidence to support this argument already. Take Unilever, for example. Nearly half of the company's top 40 brands focus on sustainability. And actually those brands are growing 50% faster than the company's other brands. And they're delivering 60% of the growth as a result of that. It is a success story that's driven by a brand's ability to connect on a level that is not rational. It's based on the irrational need and wants of a population that is demanding change that's been brought about by this combination of a tipping point of the environment and the generational change and all these different things. We also have brands like Patagonia, who have been motivated and driven by purpose and the planet from day one, actually. And you can see their astronomical growth from 2015 to 2017. They went from just over 0.5 billion to $1.5 billion in revenue as a result of the fact that their brand, being a purpose first environmental brand, has become massively relevant all of a sudden. And I think the most important elements, and this is one of the reasons that's driving Hallam, my own company, to change so drastically over the last year or so, is that our best people want to believe in us. Your best people will want to believe in you. This generation will want to invest themselves and their lives and their time in beliefs and causes that reach far beyond money and promotions and job satisfaction. There is a greater call that we have to be able to answer. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to change the planet as a company, but it means you have to contribute towards it. And that's what we mean by belief. And the truth is that companies have spent decades manipulating perception. They've spent a very long time promoting an ideal of the workplace that isn't real. These stock photos that you would have all been very familiar with paint a picture of a working environment and a type of company that doesn't really exist. It isn't real. And I think the main difference is we were willing to accept certain forms of marketing as a manipulation of the truth. We were willing to accept that it's okay to show something that's maybe what we want to be, but not really what we are. And I think the reality now is that customers and employees and stakeholders are expecting you to tell the truth. They're expecting you to show us exactly who you are, to show up for what you actually are. And it has to be real. So painting a picture of an ideal is no longer enough. It's telling the truth with conviction and with honesty and transparency that's going to make that difference. And it can't be faked. It is time to tell the truth, as I've just said, to be true to something. Now, what that means is to be relevant, you have to take a stance as a brand. For example, if you're a marketing company, you could take a stance against unethical black hat SEO, for example, or you could take a stance against unsolicited messaging or unsolicited communications. Or if you're a manufacturing company, you could take a stance against waste or cutting down on plastics, but it has to be something you actually do, and it has to be part of your central core of how you communicate. To be liked, you have to tell the truth. So to be relevant, you have to take a stance. To be actually liked, and for that to move the needle, it has to be true. And the truth is not negotiable. People see through it. We have a highly sophisticated, well-connected, and socially conscious audience that is very, very quickly becoming the main decision-making force in the planet, who will no longer tolerate companies treading water with and hesitating on facts and truths that are not 100% transparent. You can visualize it like this. It's all connected, and the customer is still at the core. The shareholder, the society that they serve, and the employee are all parts of an ecosystem with the customer at center, but all those parts are equally important to the customer. And they're all interconnected, and none of them can be sacrificed. And putting society last for the share of profit, or vice versa, are unsustainable in the future of certainly in the way that we market companies. So what can we do? What should we do? What can we do? So it is a complicated and long process, but I can talk about some of these different, some of the things that we're doing, and some of the things that we believe that you can do. One of them is to build a brand that's worth believing in. A brand like Patagonia has been built on the principle of saving the planet. They've donated 1% of their revenue to environmental causes for decades. They refuse to sell their products to companies that actively harm the environment. There is a brand that is built from the ground up on a true sense of purpose that's worth believing in. And if we want to motivate people beyond what we do, we have to be able to motivate them because of why we do it. So building a brand from the ground up that's built on those fundamental values is the key. And even if you have those values already and you're doing them for real, You have to talk about them. Something I talk about a lot at Hallam is values are not something you can write, you just write on the wall. And we say, take your values off the wall. Now, it doesn't mean you literally should. You can put them on the wall if you really want to. But they can't just be there because you've forgotten what they would be otherwise. They're there because they actually mean something. It should govern every decision, every behavior, every business investment should be driven by a system of values that are active calls to action to something greater than profit. And that's what we believe the values should be. And that's why I think values are important. And every single decision, whether it's hiring or investing or building a team or building a product, should be based on those values. But there can't just be a cliche like integrity or honesty. Those are not actions. Those are the outcome of doing something well. So what are the actions that are going to take you there? And sounds very obvious, but make ethical, sustainable, and inclusive things a normal part of everyday business. Being actively anti-racist or being actively inclusive of sexualities or actively reducing your use of plastics and making that a normal part of everyday business rather than a special once a year thing or an outlier or something that you think is a special project. Making it normal is the first step. And the fact is that the conversation is already happening. More and more brands that we would have never associated with purpose and the betterment of the planet are already changing. So it's something that is a global cause. It's a global movement, and it's been clearly demanded by the audiences that we're trying to sell to and we're trying to build companies with. And we have to answer that call. So being part of the conversation and not being silent on the issue is the most important first step, I think, that we can take. To acknowledge the fact that it needs to happen. And a good example of this is Apple, a company that from the very start has built its brand on being somewhat non-compliant with certain things. And one of the things that they've done very well, I think, in the last couple of years is putting everything behind their call for privacy and taking on Facebook and actively sabotaging their ability, for example, to target users in a harmful way through third-party cookies by killing the cookie in Safari and putting iOS restrictions on the ability to track users based on the browsing history. That type of bold commitment, of course, it's motivated by a strategy and there are commercial benefits to those strategies, but it's also based on a commitment to change the world when it comes to privacy. And they know they have the power to do that. They know they have the influence to do it, and they're putting it to good use. And I think, however humble, we all have the ability to change something that's going to add that one grain of sand to a better future. And in the future, I believe that the best brands will be rooted in human purpose, that my children, your children, will grow up in a world that is very different to the one we grew up in, where plastics, single-use plastics and shopping bags made of this awful material, they'll never see one of those ever again. They won't know what single-use plastics will look like. But we have to be able to build our companies and our brands and our strategies for marketing around that demand, because that's the future. And if I wanted to leave you with one comment, one summary, it would be to stop manipulating perception and start telling the truth. What I mean by manipulating perception is trying to look desirable or trying to look good or trying to change perception despite things that we're not doing quite right is the opposite of what we should be doing. We should be transparent. We should be willing to learn and be very, very clear about why we believe that things should be better and what it is our grain of sand that we can contribute to that change. So thank you very much for listening, and I would be very happy to take any questions. So We have a question here, which is, what if my customers are not millennials? So that's quite a common misconception, actually. The definition of millennial is a little bit woolly, I guess. But millennial doesn't mean young people. It means people who were born before the turn of the century, who grew up during the turn of the century. And that is a definition of, early 1980s till the mid 90s. Those millennials are now in the late 30s and early 40s. They are not necessarily young people. So I would say, unless you're in the stairlift business or retirement home business, you do have millennial customers. And even then you still have them because they're decision makers and influencers. So I think that's really quite important. Another question is, do these theories apply to B2B? Yes, I think they do apply to B2B. I was very, personally very depressed, I guess, the first time that I went to a B2B sales meeting and the person making the decision was younger than me. And I was like, well, something's gone wrong here. I've got a marketing director from a major brand who's younger than me. Those people are motivated by different things than I am. And I think the whole world of B2B is, like I said before, it's been influenced by younger people because there's a decentralized process to decision making, but also there are decision makers who have the power to make a decision who are in the B2B space. I don't think there's any difference in that. The other thing also that I would say is every person at the end of a marketing message is a human, and actually we need to sort of ease up on the definition between B2C and B2B and actually start really thinking about human to human and human marketing. And the person that is B2B goes home and they're a consumer too, and they're driven by the same motivations and the same emotional responses as a consumer would be. One last question. I've got one more. I think time for one more. Is what is a B2B influence? Can you describe what a B2B influencer is? So every B2B decision, or most B2B decisions, have what I would call a complex group or complex buying unit. It's a group of people who are being consulted or involved in making a decision, whether they're technical specialists or whether they are marketing teams or whether they are, salespeople. There is a committee or a group environment making a decision. It's not just down to the CEO or the managing director making a decision in isolation. That complex buying group, or that collective of influencers within a buying decision, is what we mean by B2B influencers. These are the people who would influence the final decision maker from a number of different departments, and they tend to be younger. And one of the reasons why they're consulted is because they are younger and because they have a ability to see things differently, and ability to perhaps sense different things and different ways of evaluating a proposal. So the B2B purchasing cycle is long and it's large, and it's comprised of people from all sorts of different audiences. One of those audiences are younger buyers and younger users. So I think that's it for questions. So thank you very much for your time, and I've been Julio Taylor, and feel free to connect with me on Twitter or LinkedIn if you prefer, and I'd be more than happy to chat or to answer any questions and to connect with you.